What's up, everyone? Scotty from Chernobyl Studios, and today is a beautiful day because I get to talk about one of my favorite amps from my favorite companies. That bad boy right there, the ENGL Savage 120 Mark II. Big thank you to Jürgen. Dude, by the way, it was great to meet you at Guitar Summit. Had a lot of fun to finally meet you guys. Just fanboy over ENGL and just say like, wow, ENGL is my favorite. So in this video, I am going to be looking at the ENGL Savage 120 Mark II. And just a disclaimer, I do get to keep the amp, but I am going to tell you everything that I know about this amp and the best way to use it, as well as anything that I may find that I don't particularly like, which is basically nothing. So, spoilers. So let's head into the demonstration video that I did with the demonstration track. Let's talk about the amp in particular, and then let's talk about what I did in the mix. All right, so here it is, the ENGL Savage 120 Mark II in this nice stealth look. I think they've also updated the faceplate. I've seen the Mark II with more of a shiny, glossy finish. This is like a matte brushed finish, which I think looks better. Obviously, your fingerprints and stuff won't get all over here. I just think it looks really cool, but this overall stealth finish looks amazing. Very metal, very sleek. As you know, it's 4 channels. You got a clean, crunch 1, crunch 2, and a lead. I am not going to go through the clean and all the crunches because that is not what I do. I am way more concerned about the lead channel, and you'll notice that I am plugged directly in here. No overdrive pedal or booster pedal required. And I'm playing in drop A here with a 7 string, and you are going to hear that there is plenty of gain. So when you're first looking at this, it can be a little confusing, but just remember, basically, if you go left to right and you go in a horizontal fashion, it's actually pretty simple. You've got your gain and then the tone stacks that'll work with the clean and crunch 1, and then the volume, and then the volumes for clean and crunch 1, and then obviously your masters are 2 masters down here. So it kind of just goes like this, into the presence, into the master, and out. I think that's pretty simple. Other people have complained, but me, it makes total sense. Same thing, crunch 2, lead. These are the tone pots that handle those 2 channels. The volumes into the presence, A or B, and then to the master, A or B. Now, the master A or B, this can be something that if you want to do MIDI learning stuff, or you want to have different settings for like a lead tone or something like that, you can set MIDI and do things like this. I'm not going to do that. But the thing that I like to use for the presence now, for example, is if I'm going back and forth between 2 presence settings, I really like this, where I can just play a riff and I can just go back and forth like this. I like this a lot in terms of just being quickly what I want the presence settings to be. I'll probably do that right now when we create a tone here. So I'm going into the lead channel here. Nothing is happening. The impulse response I'm using my Torpedo Captor X into the ENGL XXL into the Captor X with just a single Shure SI57. I'll put a screenshot up here so you can see what I'm going through. And it just sounds like this. So that's already quite a bit of gain, and for a 7 string without a boost, that's pretty impressive. So let's just go through this here, because I am going to tell you the secret of this amp, okay? The ENGL Savage is like the Bugatti, or I don't know, the Lamborghini of amps, where it's high end, it's amazing, but it's going to take a little bit of time to understand how it works. But once you understand how it works, it is just an absolute hot rod. The settings matter, and the relationship between the presence and the treble knob, for example, are excruciatingly important. And if you get this wrong or you're still working on it, you could really run into some issues with this amp. That is because the amp has an absurd amount of gain and high end. So it's hard to control. Okay, that's what I mean by like it's a high end car or sports car. It's very hard to control. You need to spend some time with this to get used to what it sounds like and to what it and how it works with your playing. Before you can just get in here, it's not like a Marshall style amp where you can just get in here. You got three tone. Now you can kind of just get in here and get in the ballpark, and it sounds good. This is going to take a little bit of extra time, but I'll show you how to do that. Okay. First thing you want to do generally is you want to pick a channel, obviously. So over here we have the lead channel. All right, you would have clean, crunch one, crunch two, and lead. Pretty simple. You got the noise gate, which I have turned on, and the depth boost, which we'll do later. Like I said, we just have this. Now we have two decisions we can already make. We can already make a high-low input going into the lead channel, okay, based on low or passive or hot pickups, as far as I understand it correctly. Generally, I'm either turning this on or I'm turning the gain low high on. I generally don't have both on because there's so much gain. You don't need it. After that, we have the bright switch. Which seems to boost the upper mids just a little bit. I generally don't use this either. Actually, these are generally turned off for me, and I just turn on the low high down here in the game. So you can definitely hear that little extra push it's getting. So it's a pretty significant push. So that's why you don't need an overdrive pedal for this or any kind of boost into this thing. And ironically, because this has so much gain, that if you start to get too much gain, you'll actually flatten your guitar tone and you'll lose definition and you'll lose the booty, the bottom end of the guitar tone. So that's just one of those things about this amp. You got to know what you're doing. The manual is a thing, so go ahead and read that. Now, once you get the gain structure where you want it to be, the next thing you got to start making tonal decisions, right? So the tonal decisions on the faceplate here are pretty simple. We've got the contour button. And this pushes up the upper mids again, which will affect how you use the middle dial here. With the contour off, you might find yourself adding mids actually. Well, with the contour on, you could be scooping the mids here with still having a crap ton of mids that you could work with. So that's the first decision you'll have to make. This rough, smooth, I don't touch this ever for rhythm guitar, but it's connected to this tone balance knob, which basically you can put a little tiny boost either in the low end or the high end. I rarely ever use this. It would be good for solos. But as you can hear, it is not meant for rhythms. It's usually meant for a melodic voice that if you want to easily bump a solo on top of a guitar tone, a rhythm guitar tone, you can just go boop, and then you automatically get a bump into a different frequency range, which is very helpful when you're mixing or playing live, for example. Right. Lead volume into the master. There have been some discussions where you need to have the lead volume cranked in order to get the most out of the amp. I don't know. I've tried low lead volume, high master, medium lead volume, and low master. This sounds pretty amazing to me both ways. I really don't care. And then finally, the depth boost. So that's again a pretty significant boost to the low end. Helps add a lot of that girth and the thickness that you might want, especially with a downtuned guitar, or even with a six string and standard E, for example, if we're being honest. All right, so those are decisions that you can already make before you even touch the tone stack. Again, we're going into that ENGL XXL cab. It's got V30s in it. I already showed you the screenshot of my settings. So it's just the one microphone here. Now here is where things get interesting, okay? This is what I'm talking about making sure the presence and the treble are working in relationship to what you're trying to do. Because if you can hear this already, it's pretty damn aggressive. And the high end presence and treble is almost to that point already where you would call it fizzy. So you need to be careful with what you're doing here. Now, generally, this is what I do. If I am going to add more presence, I will bring the treble back. So it's almost like doing an opposite like this. If I decrease the presence, I'll turn up the treble. But generally, I'm not going in tandem like this. I'm pretty much going like this when I'm setting the setting. So what I like to do is I like to turn the presence all the way down and just get used to how this sounds. Right? Sounds like my head is under a pillow. We've talked about this before. You've heard this a million times in Guitar Tone Mastery. It just sounds muffled, and the guitar doesn't sound like it has any air in it. So what I'll do is I'll just crank up by like a quarter here. All right. And then I'll find a spot where I go, okay, I think I really like that. I'll just fine tune it a little bit. Then I'll go to presence B, all right, and I'll put that down the middle. That's pretty much like my control presence setting. So here we go. And I'll just go back and forth between presence A and B. Okay, you might be tempted to go to presence B right away, which I am, but we still haven't tried anything in relationship with the treble knob yet. These two have to work together. This is basically the secret of the ENGL Savage, the Mark II anyway. The presence and the treble have to work together. So if something you're not liking in the presence, maybe it's again still more muffled, come over here to the treble and experiment. Okay, I really quite like that. What is that setting actually? Oh, let's just do this. Keep it like that. Now I'm going to switch to presence B. This is going to sound terrible, but you'll hear the difference. See, it's getting way more fizzy and crackly up there with the more presence that we have. And if you turn the treble back down, So with presence A and this treble setting, the high end is still clear. It still sounds a little muffled. However, that's okay because in the mix, it's not a big deal if I put a small little high shelf here or I do my coveted 10K boost with the API. It's always a little easier in the mix to add a smidgen of high end information to make things sound more airy than it will ever be to try to dig out too much presence or treble. Good fucking luck trying to do that. But just a small little round boost on the upper high end, that I'll do that any day of the week. All right, that's what I like right there. So now the presence is dialed in because I consider the presence to be so important with this amp. It's the first thing that I do. And actually, in guitar tone mastery, that's how I teach you guys to do it. I start from the presence. I just feel that the high end information is so important that it's just something that I like to dial in first and kind of work backwards on the tone stack. From there, we'll just do the mids. Let's remind ourselves about the contour button here. Not really a fan, so let's maybe add some mids in. And by the way, I would like to say how nice it is to move these knobs back and forth. I like that I can just kind of put my finger in here and kind of go like this, and they're very easy to move. Like they don't get stuck, they're not difficult, very comfortable, doesn't take a lot of effort, so it's great. I feel pretty good about those mids right there. The bass. So we have the depth boost on. We got to keep that in mind. Let's see what the bass does. So it thins out the tone, but it also, as we take the bass out, we hear the mids poke through a lot more as well. That's kind of funny because, like, right when you get there's like no low, no low, and then like right when you get to about here, it's just like bam, low end, hello. So we can hear how nice of an even tone that we have because we made sure to get the presence and the treble in a nice place. So let's add some gain. So that's how I would dial in the ENGL Savage Mark II. Like I said, this took me a solid 2 or 3 days to get used to working with this and to understanding, kind of the workflow that you need to do. I really believe heavily that you need to focus on the presence and the treble uh, after you've decided on the initial combination of tone settings that you want. Once you can get these two to work together and you get it in the spot that you want it to be, it's like Not a big deal to get the middle and the bass going, and then adding the gain that you want, and then you just have a crushing sounding guitar tone. All right, guys, let's jump into the actual mix session here to show you what I had to do because I had to be honest, I am not super particularly ultra happy with the guitar tone that I created for this. This was still kind of in the stages where I was fumbling around. Honestly, I should have waited to print this one out, but I thought, screw it. This is a great learning experience for you as well to show you that even with all of my experience and generally being pretty good at what I do, sometimes I don't nail it 100%. So is the tone completely totally awful? It is not, but it's definitely not exactly what I would do the second time around. So this time I used a different IR. It's one of the I think it's the angle cab with the swamp thing speaker in it, which is really cool and really deep and guttural mid-range sounding. I just didn't nail the settings on the angle. And then obviously, I had my buddy over from Depravity, Przemyslav. He came over to do the guitars, and it was kind of like, well, this is the sound that it has to be, so we got to move forward. So I'll show you what I had to do here. So drums are superior drummer. The bass is the Euro bass. Now let's not worry about any of that right now. So here, just in case you forgot what it sounded like. So it obviously sounds great in the mix, but I had to do a lot of work to this one, and you're kind of gonna laugh. I'll show you what I had to do. So the very first EQ I did here is just basically fixing everything that I screwed up. Um, if we solo the guitars here, we'll go. I'll keep the limiter so we keep the level. But here's where the guitars are, and then now without, you're gonna understand what I'm talking about. So what I should have done is I should have experimented more with the microphones, especially to try and get rid of this 2K whistle, which is egregious. It doesn't mean that the speaker's bad. That's not what I mean. It means that I should have spent some time trying to find a microphone combination that helped deal with that. That would still have to be an EQ move anyway, but it wouldn't need to be minus 9 dB if I had found a better microphone combination. Okay. Now you can also see that I'm adding more mids into the guitar tone because it's very scooped, and here's what I was just talking about when I was showing you guys the amp about if you don't nail the presence in the treble, you have to start trying to doctor this in the mix because we have this fizzily high treble sound that it's a bit much, right? By doing the EQ this way, kind of like at 4K and doing almost like a band type reduction, we're taking all the frequencies out at the same time to a more manageable level. So that is a great example of more advanced EQ. You just like if I created this guitar tone 5 or 6 years ago, would have been screwed. Would have done way too much work on this. This is already way too much EQ that I would really want to do, and we're not done because there is uh, another whistle that if I had gotten the tone right, maybe all I would have had to do was this. So I'm cleaning up some boxiness down here and another whistle. So I was able to do some good doctoring in the mix to get the tone to sound far better. But this took, 25, 30 minutes. If I had just spent more time getting a better microphone combination on the speaker, probably would have been able to get there faster. We have the Pro MBN here for mostly for the chug chugs here. It's very slight. It's just to clean up and tighten the low and just a little tiny bit. Nothing crazy here. So remember what I was just telling you about, like if you dial in the guitar tone where it's a hair dark, it's not a big deal to put the API in here like what I'm about to do and boost around 10K to add air back into the guitar tone. So we're still adding air into the guitar tone here, and if you would dial it just a little bit dark, like if you know that you might need to do this in the mix, it's always easier to just boost a little tiny bit than what I just showed you, which was sitting there doctoring the EQ, all the EQ moves. And then we just have a regular soothe move here. And that is to smooth the guitar tone out just a little bit more. So does it sound awesome? Yeah, it sounds fantastic in the mix. I love the way this sounds. But what I was saying earlier when I just showed you this was that if I wasn't 100% convinced that I was getting the tone that I wanted from the amp into the speaker to record, because as you can see here, I'm not taking a DI, and I still think that I want to be in a position where I don't need to take a DI. I would rather just make a decision and through experience understand what to look out for. So this was a great learning experience, and that's why I decided to keep this particular session, not re-record everything myself, and would just go with it. When Shemek was here, we just were like, here we go, just record it, and because he recorded all these guitars, actually, this is his performance that we just kind of pieced together. I taught him the riff. He's practiced it for about 20 minutes, and then we recorded it. But how it turned out in the mix sounds brutal. All right. So that's a little bit behind the scenes on how I did the little EQ for the little demo here, and that's really going to cover the video about the Savage Mark II. Now, is this an amp that you should get? Well, let me just preface this a little bit. If you really like high gain and you like more of the European sound, and you do like to have like a soft, high presence, high end character to your tone, the ENGL Savage Mark II could be a great decision. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that do you like to play and experiment and work with a complicated tone stack, or do you just want to have low, mids, highs, presence done? Do you want more leeway? Do you want more? Do you not want to be so precise with your amp settings? Do you? It's not. Do you want like a car that will run no matter what you do, or do you want that hot rod where it has to be dialed in to get the best performance? Right. I think that's going to be most of the decision here for you to make. How much work do you want to put in your guitar tone? Do you want to have the hot rod requires a little bit of extra work and tinkering and it's a bit finicky between the presence and the treble, but when you get it right, it's amazing. Or you just want more of the amp that has, it doesn't have to be so, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't have to be exactly correct for the amp to sound to its true full potential. Those are things that you should consider. Obviously, the best case would be to go and try and play it somewhere in a store, try to get it in a room so you can hear what it feels like. Because as I was saying when I was showing you the amp, if you put too much distortion and you make it too hot, you can lose like the low end of the amp and it can just feel flat. So it's just an amp that's going to require some time to really understand how it works and to get the feel for it. I mean, as weird as that sounds, if I plug in my Invaders amp, that you can see just a little. How does this work? Like this. If you can just see my Invader, when I plug that in, I know all I have to do is put like my Maxon OD 808 Extreme in front of that, bam, 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 and I can just ballpark the tone stack, and I am I am cooking. The angle, on the other hand, takes a bit more time to dial that thing in because it's just so precise. You have to really listen and dial it in and get a feel for the amp. So if that's something that you're not interested in, then I would not recommend the ENGL Savage. But it's really hard to argue with how brutal that thing sounds. A lot of bands are using the ENGL Savage. Like I believe Obscura is using it. It sounds amazing. So once you put the time in and once you figure out how to dial it in, it is, chef's kiss. It is absolutely amazing, brutal, um, all of the above, right? So that would be my recommendation. Once again, big thank you to Angle for supporting me. I lost the Iron Ball SE due to theft in my, in Kiev. So I mean, I don't have it anymore. So you know, the Angle as a company have taken care of me, and I'm very proud to do this video for them. Once again, I do get to keep the amp, but even if that wasn't the case, that wouldn't change my thoughts about the Savage. It's a killer amp. It just takes a bit of time to get used to. If you're willing to put the time in, it's gonna treat you pretty good. All right. So that is that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you in the next one.